Joining us now, she is one of the greats. Of course, was Pitcher of the Year, in the American Conference, multiple time All American. She's done it all in the sport. Now she's currently we'll get to ask her what she's up to now these days at USF, helping out there in multiple hats. I'm gonna say. Speaking of Georgina Corrick, back with us here on the show. How you doing?
Great. Thank you so much for having me.
All right, let's get into what have you been up to because you've got like multiple things you've been up to at USF this year. So you're not playing anymore, but you're doing other things.
Yeah, I feel like I'm definitely moving around even more than I really was as a student athlete. I was so used to just fitting that one role, showing up to practice and showing up to games and going home. I'm currently a graduate assistant. I think it's graduate manager. There's the titles are kind of up in the air these days. But essentially, I throw a lot of the BP. I'm a glorified pitching machine, which is exactly what I did back in the day, but I give up way more tanks these days. And then fortunately, I've been allowed to kind of do a little bit of what you do in ESPN broadcasting. I do a little bit of the scouting stuff. And then obviously I'm still training and trying to get ready to play overseas and professionally in the summers.
That's a lot. That's a lot of roles there. Let's talk about first of all, what's it been like being around USF, being around the team, but not playing.
It's really difficult. I think it's kind of watching everything go by through like a window. You feel like you can see it all, but you can't quite get there. It's definitely a really hard transition. I know a lot of other student athletes go through that as well, where it feels kind of like the rug has been pulled out from under you because so much of what you used to do and seek validation through was your performance on the field. And I think it's kind of a double-edged sword. Obviously, when I performed really well, I felt phenomenal, but obviously when I didn't perform so great, that was kind of a rut that you spent a long time coming out of. Fortunately, I don't really feel like I have that anymore. I feel like I give everything that I can to the girls. I'm throwing BP, I'm asking them what they need, offering extra reps and extra time if they need. But at the end of the day, I can only give them so many tools and then see what they go out and do with it. So I think being an ESPN broadcaster and getting to kind of sit in the booth and talk about all the hard work that goes on behind the scenes that maybe people don't know, that's been really the more rewarding aspect of it that allows me to stay in the game and not feel kind of that disconnect that I'm sure a lot of student athletes do feel. Just because I get to still be around kind of my best friends and a lot of the teammates and see how hard they work. And then I get to go on air and talk about all the cool things that they're doing. And then I get to learn a lot about other teams as well. I was so used to just knowing myself and my people. It's really cool to see what everyone else around the world and around the country is doing as well.
Well, let's get into the broadcasting. How did you get into broadcasting? Because I remember I knew about the grad position for a while, and then one night I see you next to Ryan Urquhart calling games, and next thing you know, you come back and do more games. So just take me how that process. How'd you get into broadcasting?
It really kind of fell into my lap. It's one of those things that obviously I did marine biology. I do global sustainability now. It's not like I ever planned to go into any sort of communications or radio or anything. I actually used to have really crippling like social anxiety. I like used to have a terrible stutter. But going through college, having to do a lot of interviews and talk to a lot of people, I got pretty good about like kind of speaking and talking about the game. And one day, Lisa Novice, our assistant coach, was like, you ever thought about getting in the booth? Like they always ask me if you'd ever want to go up there because obviously they would see me sat behind home plate, or if people would ask me like, "Hey, can you explain what this ruling was? Can you explain that?" I usually had a good idea because I've kind of seen all of it. And so one day I think they really just took a really nice risk on me and allowed me to go up there, and I put the headset on and I was terrified. But they've been awesome. Ryan obviously has been incredible. He's really been my better half who holds my hand through a lot of these things. And I think once I got in there and got really comfortable, a lot of people really liked me in there. So I think I've been really fortunate to have some really cool people in my corner to keep advocating for me to be up there and kind of do my thing.
Well, when I had you last year, I asked you about this. I said, "What about broadcast?" You're like, "No way, never, no
Oh,
way." I just find that amusing.
you probably did like inspire me to go into that. And I was like, all right, if Eric thinks that I'm good enough, like maybe I should give it a shot.
So, I mean, is this something you think you want to do now, moving forward? Is that something you're going to think about? Because I know you told me when we spoke last year, coaching was something you were kind of focused on, perhaps going into coaching. Is that still the plan? Is broadcasting now part of the plan? What kind of is your thinking process here in the future for you?
I think when you and I have spoken in the past, I'm one of those people that I love to have a plan A, B, C, D, E, F kind of situation. Because I truly think that usually what's going to happen is someone is going to talk to somebody to talk to somebody to offer you some kind of situation that you can take advantage of. So obviously that's exactly what happened with professional, with international. Like all of us are so deeply interconnected that I love having the experience in all of these different fields so that if at any point someone was like, hey, I'd really love if you did this, or hey, we have this position here, I don't feel completely blindsided going into it. I adore ESPN broadcasting. I love what I'm doing. I think it's so fun because coaching is just the ability to talk about the game in a way that everyone understands. And I think it has a massive overlap with broadcasting in that sense. I have to talk about something that I've been deeply ingrained in since I was 11 years old, but I need to be able to make sure that anybody who tunes in and watches not only can understand it, but can enjoy it. And so I think even doing this broadcasting where I would usually just be sat behind home plate doing my scouting, I'm already at the game, I'm already watching it and kind of creating an inner commentary. It's so helpful for me to now have an outer commentary to have that good conversation with Ryan or with people that are watching the game. And that probably sets me up even better in the future if I do get a coaching opportunity, if I do continue playing professionally, because I really think all of life is just your ability to communicate with others. It helps me talk to my parents, talk to my loved one, talk to my friends, because at the end of the day, if I talk professionally now, then it's so easy to come back and speak personally to other people and make those really good connections and have important communication that's not muddled.
Well, you're right about that. Let me ask you about your academics because I know that you take that very seriously.
Mhm.
What is the status of your academics? Is this your final year? You got how much time you got left?
Thank goodness I'm in my last semester. I'm about 5,500 words deep into my thesis project. So I'm sitting here typing away usually in the Wichita State Airport when we were abandoned in Kansas. Like it's very difficult for sure. I've taken a lot of pride in my academics, but I think that's because I love learning. I like learning things about what's around me, but having the structure of someone being like, "Hey, I need you to write a 30-page paper about the Florida black bear." That's kind of difficult when I'm also trying to throw all the BP and trying to announce all the games. And if you see me behind home plate, I'm usually babysitting a bunch of small children. Like I've usually got so much going on that I take a lot of pride in my academics, but I'll definitely enjoy kind of having that expectation off of my plate. I'm still gonna be learning, I'm still gonna be coaching and doing all those things, but maybe not writing thesis papers that I have to do a bunch of citations on. That's less fun.
Yeah, I don't think anybody's ever like clamored for like writing thesis
Some people
papers.
are. If that's your thing, that's your thing. But unfortunately, it's just not my thing.
You just got to do what you got to do to get by, or do what you got to do to finish the job there.
Exactly.
What's it been like being around Coach Erickson and the staff on the other side? Obviously, you've known Coach Erickson for a long time. You've played for Coach Erickson. They're always a great bond the two of you have. But now you've been on the other side, working basically for him. What's that been like?
It's interesting because I feel like I work less for him now than I did ever before. I think sometimes as a student athlete, you feel like your relationship, as important as it is to develop that personal connection, and I had a really great connection with Coach E. It always feels a little transactional. It feels like he's giving me playing time, and in return, I'm giving you a good performance. And not that it discredits who you are as an individual, just oftentimes as a coach, from the business aspect of sports, you have to play the people that are going to give you the best transactional kind of output. And now I don't really have that pressure anymore. I'm able to have conversations with coach. I'm usually picking his brain about things because he's been around so long and he's done so many of the things that I want to do. I tell you how important it is for me to like gain those experiences and kind of get like my fingers in kind of every sort of like hat around here. And he's someone who's done that very, very well and has maintained a lot of good personal relationships doing so. So I love kind of having that relationship with him now that feels almost more of an equal than it ever did before because obviously it's so important to maintain that player coach boundary. And now we're kind of a little bit closer. So it's cool getting to like travel with him and see a lot of the stuff that goes on behind the scenes and then, bug him about his family life, how he's doing as a person. Because it feels sometimes when you're doing that from a player to a coach, it can be misconstrued as you trying to create a relationship in order to further yourself. But it no longer feels like that. It feels like we're kind of becoming friends.
Yeah, that's the funny. Have you? How many of the Ken Erickson stories have you gotten now in the last year? Yeah, you know
I
what
think
I'm talking about.
Oh, I know. I think I've heard most of them and then at least duplicates of about 50%. The best thing about Coach is he's gonna tell you a story because it's a good story, and that story doesn't expire. So I've heard it my freshman year, my sophomore year, my junior year. But he always has these fun little tidbits of wisdom. So he still manages to surprise me somehow, which is very interesting.
He's always got to save a couple tricks up his sleeve.
Of
That's for sure. Let's talk about your playing status. Tell us about your playing status. You mentioned playing professionally and overseas. Where are you as far as playing this upcoming year in the future? Where are you with that?
So I re-signed both of my contracts for AU. So I'll be doing the AUX season in Rosemont this year. Obviously, previous summer it was in San Diego, which was stunning, amazing. I loved it. So I've re-signed my contracts for AUX and AU. So both of those are going to be hosted in Chicago this year, which will be super exciting because I've never been. And then kind of sandwiched right in between the AUX and the AU schedules, I still play for the Great Britain national team. So been super exciting. We've had like a bunch of really, really big hires for GB. We picked up Tara Henry, obviously, as the head coach. We picked up Jen Schroeder as the battery coach. It's been really interesting pulling in some of these really big softball names because I think for a while GB got along kind of just being a program that was slowly but surely accelerating. And now it really feels like we're in this big snowball going down a hill because Tara has been so big on creating professionalism and providing us all the opportunities that she thinks a professional program should have. So I think for about a week and a half, 2 weeks there, sandwiched between AU, I will be flying over to England for training and then Ireland for our competition, where we're in a bracket with Australia, Team USA, Ireland, of course, because they're hosting. It'll be really exciting. I'm really, really pumped.
Yeah, that's the World Cup, right? That they're
Yes,
talking about over there. Yeah, we
I
that's gonna be
know.
an exciting event there. Where do you feel the national team is? Because I remember you've talked about it. That's one of your goals is to grow that. And obviously, you had a great run in this last summer in the European Championships, finishing second. Where do you feel like you're ahead of the schedule here? What's it like building that?
I think the hardest thing with international is it's not year round. So sometimes when you talk about collegiate softball, it's fun because we have a fall, we have a preseason, and then we have pre-conference, and then we have conference, and then we have postseason. So you get a really, really long span of time to kind of see where everyone shifts and moves. International softball doesn't really have that. You have to just assume that everyone is training and getting better over the breaks, and then you have a ridiculous 2 week span where everyone competes, goes head to head. So I can't often say like how we're sitting because going into international play, sometimes I'm like, wow, I feel super prepared. And then the Italian national team walks in, I'm like, oh, they look a little bit more prepared than me. So it's one of those things that you never really know until you get there. So you feel like you're constantly like a dog chasing after that rabbit. You're never quite going to catch it, but as long as you're moving, you're going in the right way. So I think it's really exciting to kind of see that. I can never tell until I get there, but that's what me pitching all day every day here with USF and then going and playing professionally going into it is that the best that I can do is prepare myself for absolutely everything so that I'm never quite surprised. So I can never quite say how we're sitting, but I really, really like what Tara's doing with the program and how all of the girls are really coming together, like culturally and emotionally. She's doing a good job of establishing a really good team dynamic and atmosphere really early.
Compare pitching internationally in an international competition versus pitching in a professional level versus pitching in the highest level in Division 1 college softball.
It's it's very interesting. I like to think about obviously everyone loves to say that pitchers kind of are princesses. We have to have things certain ways. I think bouncing back and forth between professional, international, and collegiate really dissuades that because you never really know what you're going to play on. So collegiately, like I was very fortunate in having the stadium and the facility that I did at USF. I had a really good dynamic with my catcher. I was able to garner that every single day and really kind of make it flourish. Athletes Unlimited was very different. I was fortunate to have Deja Molapola behind the plate for me pretty much my entire time at AUX. So that was amazing. I was able to make a really, really good bond with her, but I still only threw to her for a week or two. You know, even knowing that we were able to make a phenomenal connection. And then you go international, and I'm able to have that connection with my catchers for GB from an emotional standpoint, but physically, I'm only going to see them for a couple of days. So it's very a lot of moving pieces. I'm not sure what field I'm going to play on. Is it turf? Is it sand? Is it the middle of nowhere out in Barcelona? Is it, you know, you never really know these things. What am I going to be throwing? Is it a different ball? Am I allowed to have these certain grips? It's it really puts me on my toes, but I think it makes me a better pitcher because of it. I don't one small variable isn't going to throw me entirely off my game. It forces me to constantly be changing and adapting. So I think that helps me in all aspects of coming back to college. Now I'm working on new pitches, I'm working on new styles. And then that way that no one can really kind of guess what I'm going to do until I get where I am. And then you have exactly as much time as I do to adapt. And I think that I'm a better adapter than most. So I take a lot of pride in that, in my ability to intellectually and physically adapt and change.
Yeah, that's tremendous. Speaking with Georgina Corrick here on In the Circle, I had Sydney McKinney on the show recently, and she joked,
Wonderful human being. Love her.
great human being, but she said as much as she admired you and likes you, she was glad you weren't pitching anymore because she was tired of seeing you every year in her career, basically. I think she said it was like 4 years you two faced each other.
It's one of
Uh,
those things, yeah, where you face each other so much. I swore I saw Sydney for like 8 years straight.
yeah,
I'm very glad I don't have to pitch against her anymore.
yeah, I think the feeling's mutual between the two of you, although she acknowledged that she's probably going to run into you once again once she goes pro at
God,
some
I hope
point.
so.
Uh, what has it been like for you to see some of those familiar faces? Uh, because you're kind of going to go through the conference here and see some familiar, like Sydney, what she's doing. Obviously, having another monster year. You're going to see UCF here in a few weeks, and see some familiar faces. What has that been like for you to see those familiar faces in the conference that you faced for many years?
I think it makes me like I kind of feel like a mom, like really proud, kind of in that moment because I think the greatest thing to always think about is that iron will always sharpen iron. So getting the chance to play against the Sydney McKinneys, the Addison Barnards, the Jada Codys, the really, really greats that always sit very high in a competitive aspect, and that I had to be on my best game to beat them at their best game. And there's a lot of mutual respect there, which almost feels a little bit like friendship. I talk about Sydney. I always have really phenomenal things to say about her even if we've never went and got a coffee, we've never really hung out. I can tell by the way that she carries herself on the field and the way that she competes that she's a good person as well as a good athlete. And I take a lot of like pride and excitement in talking about, oh yeah, I played against her or I played with her. Because for me, that kind of is a pseudo friendship. It's this kind of relationship that you develop with your competition because you know that you made them better and I know that they made me better. So we were kind of constantly playing this laddering game where I love seeing them succeed because I feel like I had a small part in helping them get better and compete every time that they beat me, every time that I beat them. Each one of us was developing and growing. So that's why I love being able to talk about those people and being like, oh my God, like Sydney, I love her. I want nothing but the best for her. Obviously, I'm never hoping that she does phenomenal against us, even though she did hit a grand slam against us this weekend. But it's one of those things that iron will always sharpen iron. And the same way that I want to grow the game internationally here within the US, that comes with advocating for each individual athlete. And that is general advocacy for the sport.
One of the big stories this year, obviously in the American Conference, I know you follow the league closely, is so many great pitchers graduated. Yourself, obviously, that was the big story from the outside about how is South Florida going to do without Georgina Corrick. UCF graduated Gianna Mancha and Kamal Woodall. Wichita State graduated a couple pitchers, so on. What's your thoughts on the league this year? Because you mentioned now you're wearing the booth, so part of the role now is where because you're doing more games, is got to kind of talk about the league and talk about the other teams in the league. What's been your thoughts?
I think I get very excited from a pitcher standpoint because we're kind of seeing the slow decay of aces in the era of technology and how much you can do scouting. We're starting to see more staff approaches, which was always kind of the suggestion at USF. I know I threw quite a lot of games, but we always had kind of the idea that if we needed to build an attack against the team, we had the staff to do it. So you're seeing obviously like Gianna Mancha moving on, Kama Woodall moving on, Bailey Lang moving on from Wichita State. You're not seeing pitchers throw entire games, you're seeing staffs. So at USF, obviously, we've seen Gabriella Nori, we've seen Peyton Dixon, we've seen Antoinette Hill, Vivian Pond, pretty much Lexi Kopko all settling onto the mound. You've seen similar things from UCF. We've seen Sarah Willis, obviously, the ability to go the entire game, but also being supplemented by Brace Jewell. We see a lot of really, really good pitchers like Hatch at ECU being supplemented by an additional pitcher. So it's one of those things that I get very excited because we know for sure the offense is spiking. Looking at higher RBI numbers, higher home run numbers, hotter bats, better swings, more strength ability in female athletes. To combat that, it can't just be one person anymore. It's very difficult, I know from a personal standpoint, emotionally and physically, to take the weight of being an ace, right? That's a really fun title people love to throw around, but they don't often think about how detrimental that can be to the ace, to the individual athlete. So I get very excited from a pitcher standpoint to see that it's no longer sole responsibility and dependency placed on one person, whether that's a hitter or whether that's a pitcher. I love the idea of staff approaches and creating more variability across an entire team because I think that's healthier, obviously physically for allowing less innings, less pitches thrown, but on top of that, just mentally for the advocacy of the sport again, is that you have to be able to protect the person because without the person, you have no player.
Yeah, you kind of bucked the trend in Coach Erickson there. I mean, he likes to make those pitching moves. He's that baseball style. You were buck the trend because he's like, I got to give her the ball. What am I going to do?
Oh,
So
yeah.
let's ask you about the USF staff. What's been your thoughts on them? Tell us a little bit about this staff because obviously there was a lot of questions about who's going to take your spot. People wondered, but I've always said I've known Coach Erickson for a long time. He always finds the next pitcher. We talked about this before the season. People wondered who was going to replace Erica Nunn, and oh yeah, there's this young kid named Georgina Corrick to come in, and yeah, Nevins, and all the great pitchers that have been at USF. So tell us a little bit about this staff and what you expect from them, not only this year but in the future, because it's a young staff in some cases, but with potential.
Yeah, that's definitely, I think, the main takeaway is that it is such a young staff. Obviously, Gabrielle Noria, fifth-year transfer in from Lehigh, she brings the experience, is probably the most experienced arm in the circle, and it definitely shows. Of course, when she's come in, she's the one who's had the ability to really throw the complete games. But then Peyton Dixon, also a redshirt freshman, has come in without a lot of game experience, but quite a bit of training and done really, really well. So I think the exciting thing for Coach Erickson is he is able to have kind of another like I hate to kind of talk about myself because I feel a little washed up these days, but someone who came in as a freshman and did very, very well and has the ability to grow. I think sometimes when you rely on one pitcher, you forget that that one pitcher is successful year in and year out, not because they stayed the same, but because they changed, right? If I stayed the same exact pitcher I was as a freshman, people would have gotten used to me and I would have gotten hit harder and harder and harder. I had to change and adapt. And I think the best part of having a young staff, such as the one that Coach Erickson has with USF, is you have young minds that are malleable. You're going to have young catchers behind the plate, you've got young pitchers in the circle, and both of them are learning together. And that allows communal growth, which is really the best way to kind of establish a bullpen. Everyone loves to talk about the way that you can build bullpen dynamics and build good pitching staffs, but it's because they grow together. If you have one person focusing on themselves and another person focusing on themselves, and then you bring them together and ask that they perform, a lot of times they can't because individual skill sets don't translate to team atmospheres. So it's one of those things that I think Coach Erickson's really exciting to have a pitcher like Dixon, even like a Jaden Martinez who's come in and do quite well as a freshman, a Morgan Grubb, that will gain a lot of experience and knowledge by the innings that they've pitched. Even if they get hit a little bit, everyone gets hit a little bit, but it's the ability to be malleable and young and forget about it and learn and move on that is going to allow him to build hopefully more of a staff versus an individual ace or a couple of strong pitchers. Because obviously, as we know, you can't rely on just one person because your whole community can topple if that one person goes down.
Ooh, good phrase. That's good phrase there. There you go. See, I told you, you're meant for the on the air stuff. There you go. What's the most popular question that any of the pitchers have asked you about?
Oh gosh. A lot of them will ask me like how I grip things because it drives them nuts that I grip everything exactly the same. Like technicality wise, like they're
Sure.
always like, what are you gonna do? Like, what are you doing all summer? And I'm like, you're just like my mom. Like, leave me alone. I'll figure it out. But like technicality wise, a lot of them like to like pick my brain about little things because usually I was such an experimenter. So usually when they're struggling to find something, they're like, what do you see in my pitch? What do you see here? What do you see there? That's usually their number one question is what do you see? Because it's so nice to have a set of experienced eyes on you, especially as a young pitcher when you are experimenting and messing around with new things. You don't know what you look like from an outsider's perspective. So a lot of times they'll just ask me to come and stand in the bullpen and be like, well, what do you see? Like what? And I'm like, oh, you're doing this, you're doing this, you're doing this. And they can make small adjustments. But it's never judgmental. And it's definitely not like I go out of my way to be like, hey, you look bad today. What are you doing over there? It's definitely a really nice place of mutual respect where they ask me to turn my eyes on them because I've kind of seen it all and hopefully be able to provide them some kind of assistance with that.
What's one thing you've learned this year, either while you've been scouting, sitting in the stands, or in the booth, that you've observed that you're like, man, I wish I would have picked up on that when I was playing here. Like, is there a couple? Because there's always things. It's a different point of view, so you probably see some things you probably didn't see when you were playing. What is there a couple things that have stood out?
Yeah, I was never a stats girl when I played. I hated knowing the numbers. I hated knowing what was really going on. I was very much I was gonna watch your swing and that was gonna tell me like how I was gonna attack you or oh, if you usually have a name for yourself, why do you have a name for yourself? And then I can kind of see almost a translational aspect in what they do as a player. I think the hardest thing is going to the booth and everyone needs proof of things. I can't just be like, oh, this looks like a really phenomenal hitter. I have to be like, well, she looks like a really phenomenal hitter because she's batting 350, because she has this many RBIs, because she has this many stolen bases. I think that's been a really different change of perspective in me, because as a player, I can know that someone batting 110 is just as likely to take me yard as someone batting 500 if their strength of swing matches up with my weakness of style. So it's one of those things that I'm trying to bring a little bit more of that into the booth, where so much that we're seeing at the young age is young kids being defined by their statistics, when statistics really can be extremely biased even without them knowing it. So I like to kind of combat that a little bit more. I obviously know that stats is the name of the game from a broadcasting sense, but I think being an analyst or a colorist is the ability to bring life into the numbers and be like, well, I think that these numbers are a lie, and I'm going to tell you why I think that they're a lie, and kind of have that conversation. And hopefully that if people are listening in and watching in, and maybe there's a young girl at 14, 15 who's only batting 200 with this many RBIs, whatever, and people are telling her she's not good, I want to be the person telling her that she is good because she's doing the right things. It just hasn't worked out yet. Because I think that's a really important part of developing the game, is not letting kids get discouraged by the numbers when the physicality is there. So I think, just from my perspective now, coming into the booth and coming on the other side, is that it's so important to emphasize that just as much as we talk about some of the other things, that I think made me a really good collegiate player, was because I didn't care what my stats said. I was just going to go out and pitch the way that I wanted to.
Well, and tell what they bring to the team that's not necessarily statistics. I mean, I remember Josie Foreman was a great example. We've talked so much in the past about her when she's played. It's not about her stats, even though she had a great offensive year last year, but it's really her helping call the game, being your personal catcher. I've talked to Coach Erickson about that. And those are, I'm sure, some of the things that you can bring to the table and what this player can do, not just necessarily offensive, but the defensive side of the game from a leadership standpoint, from an intangible. Another player that comes to mind, somebody you're real tight with, is a Katie Burge, who
Mhm.
is a valuable player for UCF, that the numbers don't tell the story, what she does in the dugout and being that cheerleader, and being that knowing everybody's role and accepting her role, right? Those are some of the stories you're trying to point out as well in the broadcast.
Yeah. Well, even think about, from an international standpoint, Great Britain has always been a little bit of an underdog. Like, looking at our statistics or what we bring to the table per se, no one would expect us to do as well as we do. But kind of talking about Katie Burgess, the Amy Moores, the Kendalls, who do so well because no one expects them to, and because they do all the intangibles well. And then when it comes down to it, those are the people that you want on your side. So I talked about how individual skill sets don't always correlate to what a team can bring dynamic wise. Katie Birch is a massive example of it. I'm obviously her biggest fan. That's my little buff baby. I love her. She's doing phenomenal. But I care more about her as an individual and what she brings to the team exactly in intangibles, than anything that she could ever provide on the field. Because I think that elevates my gameplay, and hopefully my ability to be a good friend and a good teammate to her elevates her gameplay. And that's how we talk about team dynamics in a really good, constructive way.
Who have you seeked out for advice on the broadcasting side? Who do you pick? Who do you pick brain as far as, hey, what should I do here? Who have you reached out to? Anybody in particular?
Tara Henry obviously has been wonderful. She's provided me a lot of guidance and phone numbers that I can text and call if I need to bother people. I'm really fortunate in that even the home crowd that we have is really, really well experienced. I could talk about Jen Schroeder and Tara and Amanda Scarborough and all the people, Michelle Smith, that are incredible names and deserve to sit as highly as they do. But my hometown hero is Ryan. Ryan has been awesome, has taken me into the booth and is very good about, we'll have full conversations where he's just hitting his button. He's like, hey, just remember, you want to say it this way. Hey, just a reminder. He'll write like little fun notes. And we have so much fun doing the broadcast, because I think he really enjoys having that ability to teach what he does so well. And I'm just a sponge. I love learning about it. So obviously I take a lot of advice watching your broadcasting, with Alex Powers. I watch all these ones across the country, and I kind of gain an inner monologue of how really good broadcasters sound. And then I get to sit next to Ryan and kind of be a soundboard with him, and be like, do you think that this dad joke's gonna hit? And he's like, I don't know, man. And I was like, all right, I won't say it then. I'll keep it for me and coach.
Yeah, probably right. Yeah, do's and don'ts there.
Trust me, coach will
But
laugh.
I think I've noticed too, as you've done more games, you tend to have talked more about the opponents,
Mhm.
and not just, because obviously you know the USF inside out, right? It's kind of like me with UCF. I know UCF inside out, but I always try to talk a lot about the opponents, give that audience kind of that balanced feel. For UCF fans to maybe, for example, learn about the opponent. And also, there's a lot of opponents' fans that are going to tune in. There's a lot of casual fans that are going to tune into. How important do you keep that in mind? That, yes, obviously you know USF inside out, but hey, I want to talk about some of the great players on the opposite side, like I got to do with Stinnie McKinney. I did with you when you played here against UCF many a time.
I appreciate that, Eric. That means the world to me. But I think it's super important that you talk about the game. As a broadcaster, I know obviously, in a sense, I am quote unquote employed by USF. But as an ESPN broadcaster, I'm unbiased. My job is to talk about the game and provide commentary and experiential knowledge for what's going on the field. So obviously, what's usually happening is relatively close to 50-50. So I'm not going to be able to just talk 80 to 90% USF when the other team is providing 50% of the material as well. So that's kind of where I was really, really adamant as a pitcher. Sometimes, like from the dugout, they'd be like, "Oh, like they're the enemy, they're the enemy, the enemy." And I was like, "Yeah, like they're the enemy because they want to compete against us. But I can be a better competitor by respecting what they bring to the table. You can't just speak poorly about people because at the end of the day, there's scholarships in the other dugout. Someone there it is their dream to play D1 softball, just the same that is my dream to play D1 softball. So as a broadcaster, I try to bring that kind of perspective in that as important as it is that a USF fan can tune in and learn about the USF crowd, if someone's mom is watching them compete for ECU, for, I don't know, Marist, I want them to hear me talk about their kid or their friend or, their mentor in a really positive light because they are competing and providing a lot to the game in that aspect as well. So I think for me, it comes down to respecting the players who bring the excitement to the game. And that's what I do. So I never usually think it as me being unbiased towards USF. It's just I'm talking respectfully about the people that provide me with what I'm communicating about.
Yeah, that's part of the game. It's great players all across the board.
Mhm.
Like I said, when Stinnie McKinney's doing her thing, you got to kind of explain. Yeah, she's pretty awesome. That's what she does.
Very,
Georgina
very
Corrick shut
awesome.
us out, right? It's just that's a big part of that. What do you see yourself in living in Tampa? What's your thought? Because obviously that's been your home now for a little while. Is that something you intend on staying there? Have you thought about that moving forward? What you planning as far as whether you want to stay in the region, not stay in the region?
I'm not quite sure. Obviously, my lease is going to run up in this apartment, so I've got to, fill in all these holes that I've drilled in the wall. But my parents, fortunately, live only about an hour and a half south of me, now down towards Port Charlotte, Sarasota area. So I will most likely be dumping a lot of my things there. But I plan to travel. I'm really passionate about moving around the world and learning all the cultures and things that there are to see. I think the world is a constantly changing place, and you have to learn the people and learn the places in order to really get a good experience of how to interact with others. So if a coaching position takes me elsewhere, I will go elsewhere. If I keep playing professionally, if there's opportunities overseas, I will likely have to take those and live over there for a couple of months. I think the really exciting part about softball is that you already have like a built-in friendship with people when you step on the field. So I have a lot of friends in a lot of places who have been really fortunate to advocate for me. And so if I end up going places and I need to make new friendships, softball's a really, really good way to do it. So I think I'm one of those people that I always like to keep my doors open because not only should I be able to walk through them, I should be able to help my friends walk through them and help others walk through them as well. So probably Tampa might not be my final stopping point. It'll depend on obviously where I get a job position. But it's been really, really good to me, and I'm really, really happy to have spent so much of my time here.
Well, you got a lot of options. That's a good thing to have. A lot of options there, and you got somebody like Coach Erickson who'll probably help you in whatever direction you go to. Although he might try to keep you. Who knows? With him, I wouldn't be surprised.
He's a
Uh,
mystery to everybody. I never know.
Nobody does. I'm glad you brought that up because that's how I explain. Everybody asks me about him. Like that's he's a mystery. I
He's
just
an
when I
enigma.
think
He's the cryptid of Tampa, Florida, unfortunately.
correct. One of the things he's done though, he does a great job hosting the conference tournament. That's where the tournament will be this year in Tampa. I believe the last time USF hosted was your freshman year. That
It
sound
was.
right? What do you
And
remember about What do you remember about that year? That
I
tournament?
played left field and I made I made a catch. We This was back when UConn was in the conference. We were tied in the
Yep.
first game of the conference tournament, which obviously UConn was a lower seed. We weren't really anticipating a tie. And coach, so big on his lefty righty matchups, had Hannah Parker, a lefty with a phenomenal changeup. She actually taught me mine, in the circle, but coach wanted to be able to bounce back and forth between Hannah and I as we got into the 10th, 11th inning. So he shoved one of us in left field when the other was pitching. And I about lost my mind when a pop up actually came in the air. And I was like, oh my God, I'm going to drop this and I'm going to lose the game for us. But I caught it and we were fine and we won.
I remember that game. I called that game. I was working for the conference that game. It was a crazy game, going long extra innings. And Ken Erickson moved into the outfield. Everybody was confused in the press box why he did that. I'm like, yeah, because he wants to keep Corrick in the game without burning a move.
Yeah.
Uh,
I felt like such an athlete out there, but I'm sure I looked very much the opposite.
you did fine for yourself. You did okay. You represented yourself very well many times. What's going to be the keys? Here's my last question. I know you got to get going.
No, you're
What?
okay. My roommate's dog is crying at the door, so I'm just gonna let
Oh,
him
roommate
in.
dog. Okay.
Yeah. Hi, Mocha.
Well, let me ask you while you take care of the dog. What is going to be the key this year for all the teams when they get to Tampa as far as the conference championship? Because it feels like it's more wide open than it's been before. Obviously, Wichita State's off to a great start, but as you know, anything can happen once you get to Tampa in the conference tournament. What's some of the keys to being successful?
I think the biggest key for USF in particular, and then just really any team in the American, is they have to be smarter, knowing what the technology and the information have. Obviously, talking about Coach Bear, Coach Brad Benner at Wichita State, both of them are incredibly smart, and that's why the programs are able to climb to the levels that they've been. And it's because they're always prepared. So I think coming into the conference tournament, the biggest thing is whoever has the most information and is able to make adjustments quickest is going to be who succeeds. I think UCF with Willis in the mound and even at the plate, honestly, besides Jada Cody, Shannon Doherty, I know they've got Evans, a phenomenal freshman, Katie Burge, obviously. Um, it's one of those things that you are going to have a chock full of talent lineup, but that talent is only as good as it is applicable. So I think, especially going into the conference tournament, the teams that are prepared for it and are willing to make changes and be adaptive, because everyone's going to hit. It's not really going to be a big shutout tournament with low scores. I anticipate some high scoring games. So it's the ability to make adjustments, make offensive demands, and really just perform. The people who do the little things the best every single day are going to be the ones that come out on top. So I'm really excited to see. I know obviously the defensive firepower for USF has been awesome with Megan Piero and Kathy Garcia Soto. Marissa Trivelpiece with her bat has been awesome. So it's exciting to see some of these new names step up and be like mysteries to everybody, because it's hard to be prepared for someone that there's not a lot of information on. So I'm really excited to see, especially like the younger class, step up and perform in the tournament.
Well, I know part of you's gonna miss not pitching against UCF, although part of you's gonna be relieved you're not facing Katie Burge, because I've talked to both of you about that, and you both have told me it's always awkward when you face
It
each
is.
other.
Well, because we're not serious people. Like I'm not a
Right,
serious person. She's not a serious
right,
person.
right. Like she says she can't look at you when she's facing you, which is kind of hard when you're a hitter. It's just very awkward, weird deal there.
It is, unfortunately, but at least I
Yeah,
didn't hit her. It could have been worse. I could have like freaked out and hit her.
she was worried about that.
I would
But
also be worried about that because as small as Katie is, she scares me. I think
see,
she could beat me up.
well, and the thing is, she's kind of deceptive. Like people, like this probably as well as anybody. She has good power. Like people really underestimate her, and she's getting more playing time this year than she has the last couple of years.
Mhm.
She's definitely somebody who can hit for power and has great range in the outfield. So
Mhm.
at least we don't have that awkwardness anymore. All right,
Exactly.
uh, we're going to see you more broadcasting. What's moving forward? Tell the audience what you got coming up here, where they can find you.
So I think I will be on air for our Tulsa series at home this coming weekend. After that, all a mystery. I kind of just get my name thrown in the hat and they pull me out and they're like, hey, you're good to go. But you can definitely catch me on the Tulsa series. If not, you'll see me sat right behind home plate. I usually have at least 2 to 3 small children surrounding me, and I'm most likely eating something on air.
I've noticed that the food that's become a big thing. Me over here, our broadcast, we've had food delivered to us. I've noticed you guys have food over there.
Oh, I'm
Uh,
always snacking.
Snacking. Was that part of the deal? Like, all right, I'm coming to the booth, but food has to be part of the equation here.
No, Ryan just happens to be a phenomenal snack provider. He's like, hey, you want a hot dog? And I always want a hot dog.
That's why he's a team guy.
He's a great guy. He always brings me a hot dog, always brings me some mustard
He never
ketchup.
brought me food when I hung out with him. Yeah, what? Yeah.
I don't know, man.
All right,
Maybe
I'll
just
ask him.
more.
Probably, and rightfully so. I don't blame you. I don't blame him at all. All
It's a
right,
rivalry.
Georgina, always a pleasure to talk to you. Thanks so much for taking the time from your busy schedule. Always a fan of yours and enjoying talking to you. I know I'll see you in a few weeks in person, but in the meantime, keep knocking it out. Definitely look forward to seeing you playing this summer because that's always been a pleasure watching you play, and definitely enjoy listening to you. So keep doing what you're doing. Thanks for coming on with us.
Awesome. Thanks, Eric. I really appreciate you having me.